The sound of heavy footsteps thudded closer. A few seconds later, an unexpected figure burst into the living room.
Man, there's nothing like being home.
Uh, Standing there with a beaming smile was my ex-husband, Ryan. Ignoring our stunned silence, Ryan sank into the couch. Completely at ease, he casually said to us,
I'm back. Bet managing the household was tough, huh?
"What on earth is someone who cheated and walked out on us talking about?" Sure, things are stable now with Harry's income, but right after the divorce, it was a nightmare. And yet, this guy didn't show even a hint of remorse. Did he think we'd welcome him back with open arms? Who on earth would say something like that? I didn't feel like responding. Sean and Molly probably felt the same way. Even kind-hearted Harry was frozen in silence. Not a single one of us said a word to Ryan. This place isn't yours anymore. I'll make that crystal clear. I'm Julia Anderson, a 36-year-old homemaker. I married Ryan, who's 7 years older than me, 14 years ago when I was 22. We have 2 kids. Our eldest son, Sean, is 14. His younger sister, Molly, is 13. I'm proud to say they've grown into responsible kids who help me every day. Maybe because their father, Ryan, was so self-centered, they've used him as a negative role model and turned out serious and well-mannered. I met Ryan when I was a college student. He was an employee at the diner where I worked part-time.
Don't worry about being nervous, okay? If any tough customers show up, I'll have your back. Just call me right away.
Yes, thank you so much. He was such a kind and dependable senior at work. Ryan truly lived up to his word. Whenever there was trouble, he was the first to help. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm always causing you trouble, Ryan.
It's fine. It's a man's job to protect a woman. You can always count on me.
Without being boastful, Ryan stood tall and confident. What an amazing person, I thought. It didn't take long for me to fall for him. Afterward, Ryan asked me out a few times, and soon we started dating. We got married right after I graduated from college. I was certain no one else would ever care for me as much as he did. If I married this man, I would surely be happy. I was certain of it. But that certainty shattered right after Sean was born. What? Another night out drinking?
Yeah, we're celebrating a friend's promotion. He's worked so hard, you know? We have to toast him.
But you were out drinking until morning just 2 days ago.
That was a farewell party. It's part of work, so it couldn't be helped. Anyway, don't worry about me. Go to bed first. Later, Sean. Daddy's heading out.
When he spoke to Sean, he looked like the perfect husband and father. He worked hard at his job. And since I got pregnant with Sean soon after starting my career and had to quit, our life was only possible because of Ryan's efforts. Thinking about that, I guess a few nights out drinking is not too much to ask. I convinced myself as I got through each day. But as if being new to parenting wasn't hard enough, the constant lack of sleep finally caused my frustration to boil over. I can't take this anymore. Why is it always drinking parties? Even on your days off, you either go out or just sleep alone. I want a break too. I haven't had a decent night's sleep in days. That day, Ryan was heading to a year-end party with his coworkers.
What's gotten into you all of a sudden?
Because why am I the only one making sacrifices? Sean is both of our child, but you only dote on him when you feel like it. You don't change diapers. You don't put him to bed. You sleep whenever you want. and you go out whenever it suits you. How is that fair when we're supposed to be equal as parents? It feels like I'm raising him all by myself. Ryan had always been a free spirit, but I never imagined he would change after the baby was born. He never missed a chance to go drinking if invited and always came home late. Even at home, he'd mostly sleep or scroll through his phone, claiming he was too tired. Even when Sean cried while I was cooking, he wouldn't pick him up. How can you call yourself a father? Overcome with emotion, I couldn't stop the tears. Ryan let out a big sigh as he faced me.
Well, since we're talking, let me ask you, who do you think is the reason you can even live like this?
That's thanks to you, Ryan, but still,
No buts, right? Exactly. You and Sean have a comfortable life because I work my butt off. And yet, I can't even have a moment to relax? Would you only be happy if you took everything away from me?
no, that's not what I mean. As I struggled to find the words, Ryan shrugged dramatically.
I get it, I get it. You're jealous, right? You're stuck at home, wasting your days with a baby and no productivity, while I'm thriving at work and in my personal life. You can't stand it, can you?
No, that's not.
Alright, calm down. You're just feeling anxious.
Nodding knowingly, Ryan patted my back.
Don't worry, even if you're completely useless, I won't abandon you. Don't overthink it, okay? Later.
With that, Ryan waved his hand casually and left the house. It was a massive misunderstanding, but I was too shocked to move. Unproductive days? Completely useless? It felt like he was spelling out exactly how he saw me now. After that, I became scared to confront Ryan. What if he said something like that again? Could I handle feeling that humiliated again? I didn't want my self-esteem crushed like that ever again. Raising a child is important work too, isn't it? I was trying my best. I kept telling myself that and somehow endured. The sleepless nights continued, but luckily my mom reached out at just the right time.
Julia, if you're struggling, so am I. Don't hesitate to tell me, okay?
That's a mom for you. She seemed to know exactly how I felt. Since my parents lived 2 hours away by train, I always felt too guilty to ask for help. But this time, since my mom had offered, I was able to ask for help before reaching my limit.
Again, you're relying on her too much.
I didn't want to hear that from someone who never helped.
I just want to see my adorable grandson and my daughter.
My mom replied, covering for me. Her words brought me to tears. Eventually, as Sean's sleep schedule became more regular, I was able to get more rest too. Sleep really is essential for humans. Once I started sleeping better, the days that had felt like a living hell finally seemed brighter. Ryan continued to live as if he were single, going out whenever he pleased, but I stopped letting it bother me. As long as he was earning money, that was enough. I had given up trying to change him, knowing it was pointless. Stirring up trouble wasn't worth it. By the time Sean was 6 months old, I had reached a state of enlightenment. I'd smile and see Ryan off when he went out drinking, even feeling a little pity for him. What a sad man, choosing drinking parties over spending time with our precious son. If he doesn't realize it soon, Sean will grow up in the blink of an eye. Hoping Ryan would take his role as a father more seriously, I occasionally showered him with praise whenever he showed affection to Sean. When you hold Sean, he smiles so much. He looks so happy.
Well, of course. Sean's alive thanks to me after all.
Ryan beamed with pride. I resisted the urge to retort and just smiled instead. What a cheerful personality he had. Eventually, I found out I was pregnant with our second child. Just before Sean turned 2, his sister, Molly, was born. Knowing Ryan wasn't going to change, I decided to stay at my parents' house longer this time. When I told him, Ryan looked displeased for some reason.
1 month, fine, but 3 months? What am I supposed to do in the meantime? What about food, laundry, cleaning?
Couldn't he say something more like a loving father, like how he'd miss us or couldn't wait to see us again? This felt like a housekeeper requesting paid leave. I'll stock the freezer with meals for a month. If you run out, let me know. Since you eat out and go to drinking parties often, it should be fine. The washer does the drying too, so I'll show you how. For cleaning, maybe hire a housekeeper or a service once a week if needed. As I listed everything, Ryan looked flustered.
Well, but
There's no way I can handle a newborn and Sean all by myself. Unless you take paternity leave.
no, that's impossible.
Ryan taking paternity leave? Never happening. This sealed the deal, and I got my 3-month stay at my parents' place. When Molly turned 1, I started looking for part-time work. Our finances were getting tight. Ryan managed our budget because he insisted on it. I received a fixed amount from him every month. One day, Ryan told me he wanted to reduce that amount. What? But expenses are only going to increase from here.
You've been spoiled until now. I've been giving you too much. From now on, make do with this amount. If it's not enough, figure it out yourself.
Having married right after college, I had almost no savings. My parents would help if I asked, but that was a last resort. Job hunting without a work history and with 2 young kids was tough. Working hours, location, and pay. I applied to every job that fell within my acceptable range. All I can do now is pray. Luckily, daycare availability here wasn't an issue. But if I couldn't get Sean and Molly into daycare, it'd be game over. I thought I was already saving as much as possible. Ryan said he had been overpaying me, but I wasn't being extravagant at all. I avoided eating out unless Ryan suggested it, and I hadn't bought clothes or makeup since we got married. What more could I cut? Please let me find a job. I was anxious since I didn't feel confident, but after the interviews, I got hired by a supermarket. My working hours were weekdays from morning until evening. Though late shifts paid better, I couldn't take them because Ryan wouldn't be happy if I came home too late. The supermarket saw all kinds of customers. There, I met someone unexpected.
Wait, Julia?
Oh. The man who called my name was dressed in a sharp suit. I was confused for a moment, but as soon as I saw his face, the memories came flooding back. Harry.
Oh, it's been so long since I've heard you call me that.
That gentle smile brought back so many memories. Harry was a neighbor from back home. He's 7 years older than me, the same age as Ryan.
Never thought I'd run into you here, Julia.
I'm just as surprised. It would have made sense to meet him back in my hometown, but this was an entirely unrelated place. As we talked, I learned Harry lived nearby and often shopped at this supermarket. After that, Harry would occasionally show up, and we'd chat during my breaks at the register. Thanks to that, I started enjoying my part-time job. When my part-time wages started coming in, our life became a bit easier, and I no longer had to make the kids endure unnecessary sacrifices. Ryan seemed to grow colder and more distant. But I was so busy raising the kids that I didn't have the time or energy to focus on that. Before I knew it, Sean and Molly were already in middle school. One day, Ryan came home from work, loosening his tie, and casually dropped a bombshell.
Oh, by the way, I'm moving out tomorrow.
What? Time seemed to stop. What do you mean? Are you going on a business trip?
No, nothing like that.
Then why?
I found a place more suited for me.
Looking at my confused expression, Ryan continued with a straight face.
I've met my soulmate. We need each other. So you and the kids, you're just in the way now.
What? I was dumbfounded, unable to close my gaping mouth. A man over 40 with kids saying this to his wife? This was a blatant declaration of infidelity. And worse, from his tone, it was clear he didn't care about the kids either. I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you're saying.
You do not need to understand it. The point is, I'm leaving.
But
I am leaving this behind. Fill it out and submit it later, will you?
with that, Ryan handed me divorce papers. He was serious about moving out. What? Let's at least talk this through.
You know I'm not going to change my mind. Then you know what you need to do.
The next day, Ryan left, just as he'd said. Life after that was tough. I suddenly became the breadwinner. The only saving grace was the support I received from my coworkers. Thanks to my understanding boss, who knew the situation, I was promoted to a full-time position. You're a hard worker, Julia, he said. I was so glad I'd been diligent all this time. Sean and Molly also stepped up. We can help with chores, they said, pitching in wherever they could. At first, I worried about how we'd manage, but as the saying goes, you don't know until you try. Within a few months, life felt more fulfilling than it ever had when Ryan was around. This was thanks to my jobs, my kids, and one other person. That person was none other than Harry. After Ryan left and the divorce papers were filed, I started turning to Harry for advice. Before I realized it, we had grown closer and began to develop feelings for each other. Eventually, Harry confessed his feelings and we started dating. Without him, I might have been even more lost and certainly wouldn't have been able to create the fulfilling life I have now. A few months into our relationship, he proposed and we became a family. It was less than a year after my divorce that I remarried. I was worried about how the kids would react, but as they got to know Harry, they both warmed up to him. We all shared the same goal, and it was to work together and be a happy family. One Sunday, we all found ourselves free of plans, so we spent a relaxing day together.
Since we're all free, why don't we go out somewhere?
Sounds great. But aren't you tired, Harry?
I'm fine. Sean and Molly, do you have anywhere you want to go?
Despite being in middle school, Sean and Molly's eyes lit up at Harry's words. It was such a heartwarming sight. As I watched them with a smile, I suddenly heard a noise near the front door. Did you hear that? It sounded like the door opening. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. A few seconds later, someone unexpected burst into the living room.
Man, there's nothing like being home.
For a moment, I couldn't understand what had happened. Standing there with a wide grin was my ex-husband, Ryan. Ignoring our stunned silence, Ryan sank into the couch. Completely relaxed, he looked at us with a smile and said,
I'm back. Must have been tough managing the household, huh?
What nerve for someone who cheated and walked out on us to say that? Sure, things are stable now thanks to Harry's income, but right after the divorce, it was a nightmare. Yet this man didn't show an ounce of remorse. Did he think we'd welcome him back with open arms? Who would say something like that? I didn't feel like responding. Sean and Molly probably felt the same way. Even kind-hearted Harry was frozen in silence. None of us said a word to Ryan.
Hey, what's with the silence? Or are you too shocked to hear me? Nervous because it's been so long?
Then Ryan finally noticed Harry. His eyes widened and he frowned.
Who's this guy? Hey, what's going on here while I'm around? Don't tell me. An affair? Answer me, Julia. Are you really that unfaithful?
I had no desire to argue with a fool. This wasn't about intelligence. He was just too immature as a person. He's shouting angrily with his face bright red. But wasn't he the one who cheated and left us in the first place? Meanwhile, I had finalized the divorce and remarried properly, following all the legal and ethical steps. There's nothing wrong legally or ethically. He has no right to ignore his own actions and say whatever he wants.
Hey, Julia, Sean, Molly.
Frustrated by our silence, Ryan's voice grew louder. When I turned my face away in silence, Sean and Molly followed suit. Harry looked like he wanted to say something, but I held him back by tugging on his arm.
What's wrong with all of you ignoring me like this?
No matter how much he yelled, our family continued to completely ignore him. For someone as prideful as Ryan, it must have been unbearable. He kept ranting and raving, but when it became clear we weren't going to respond, he finally stormed out.
Fine, today's not the day. I'll come back and you'll see. Remember this.
It was the very definition of a sore loser's exit. I exchanged glances with Molly, and we couldn't help but laugh.
Remember this. Did he really just say that? Who even talks like that?
Exactly. But still, he said he'd come back, but will he really? I wasn't entirely convinced, but a week went by and Ryan still hadn't shown up.
Maybe he's not coming back after all.
Sean said, walking beside me on a quiet Sunday 2 weeks later. That would be nice, wouldn't it? As I sighed, recalling how difficult Ryan could be, I suddenly heard someone calling my name from behind.
Hey, who's that young guy cheating on me, huh? First that other guy, and now you're after some kid because I'm gone?
It was none other than Ryan himself, speaking rapidly without waiting for a response. He seemed to have misunderstood completely, seeing Sean and jumping to conclusions. Sure, Sean had grown taller over the past year, but he was still just 15. You'd think Ryan would at least recognize his own son's face. After all, they'd seen each other just a couple of weeks ago. I was too stunned to respond, but Sean stepped in.
What are you even talking about, mister? Are you serious?
Mister, is that any way to speak to your elders? Who raised you?
Well, I'm his parents, right here in front of you. Or would you like me to hand you a mirror?
Huh?
Finally, it seemed to click for Ryan. He blinked and stared at Sean, then muttered, "Oh."
Oh, it's you, Sean. I didn't recognize you with those stylish clothes.
Even if you're my ex-dad, you'd think you'd remember your own kid. How little did I matter to you?
No, that's not it. I just slipped up.
Mistaking your own son for someone else, let alone for a romantic rival, was beyond offensive to both Sean and me.
But this works out. Sean, be happy. Your dad's coming back.
No thanks. I already have a dad.
What?
Ryan frowned as Sean waved enthusiastically to someone behind him.
Speak of the devil. Dad, Molly.
Ryan turned around quickly. There stood Harry and Molly, waving back.
Sean. Oh, and you must be.
Harry greeted Ryan politely, but Ryan glared at him with hostility.
Sean, who the heck is this guy?
Looking at the two of you side by side, it's obvious who the better man is. This is my dad, and that guy over there is my ex-dad.
Nodding with an "I see," Harry casually stepped between Ryan and me.
Hello.
His voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable weight. Ryan stared at Harry in frustration.
You're saying you actually divorced me and remarried this guy? No way Julia would do that.
He muttered to himself, clearly spiraling.
Julia, you were always such a cautious woman. There's no way you'd accept some random man after just a year. Tell me this isn't true.
It's true. Harry is my husband. After you left, he supported me and our family.
Lies.
Ryan clearly couldn't accept the truth, so he called everything a lie.
I see how it is. You were desperate for money. You remarried because you went broke without me. How pathetic and sneaky of this guy.
It's astonishing how he can twist facts to suit himself just because they're hard to accept. I didn't remarry for money. I married Harry because I love him as a person and as a man.
That's ridiculous. It's the money. You were struggling after I left, so you had no choice.
So you're admitting you left us knowing we'd struggle financially? Isn't that incredibly cowardly? Ryan flinched at my cold response for the first time. Then Molly hugged Harry's arm tightly and said,
Thank goodness Mom got rid of such a cowardly man. Now we have an amazing dad, and I'm so happy.
Hearing that from his own daughter must have been a shock. Ryan staggered and left without saying a word. Harry, looking apologetic, said, The kids are so mature. I've done nothing to deserve this. But Sean and Molly reassured him, You're too kind, Dad. Leave handling people like him to us. After all this, I thought Ryan wouldn't dare come near us again. But it seems some people possess unexpected resilience. Ryan returned to our house less than 3 days later.
What are you doing here?
Watch your tone with your father. What's wrong with a parent visiting their kids? It's not like I've been served a restraining order.
Maybe I should have gotten a lawyer to take it that far. I hadn't expected him to be this persistent. Honestly, after he left, I thought I'd never see him again, let alone face this mess. For the last time, this house is in my name. Stop barging in without permission. I barely managed to block him at the front door, but Ryan kept trying to force his way in, causing frustration for both me and the kids.
If I feel like it, I'll ring the doorbell. I'll even call out to my kids in public. I have every right to do that. It's my business.
I'd assumed the divorce would mean the end of this, but it had turned into an incredibly messy situation. Would contacting the police make any difference? Or would they brush it off as just family drama? Well, if that's the case, we'll handle it ourselves.
I'll help. And the kids are on your side too.
Thanks. Let's do this. We began preparing to confront Ryan. In the meantime, he continued showing up unannounced. We ignored him entirely or responded with meaningless nods. For someone like Ryan, who craved attention, our indifference was worse than being yelled at. As expected, he started losing his confidence. Just yesterday, he looked visibly frustrated and depressed.
Won't this provoke him into doing something drastic?
I smiled at her reassuringly. Don't worry. The day to settle this is almost here. 3 days later, as if on cue, Ryan showed up again, furious and out of control. It seemed he had finally reached his breaking point.
Enough already. This petty harassment is disgusting. Don't you feel ashamed as human beings?
Standing before Ryan, whose face was red with anger, Harry calmly stepped in.
I had hoped you'd reflect on your actions, but since that seems impossible, it's time to settle this once and for all.
What? Clear things up?
While Ryan faltered under Harry's composed yet intense demeanor, I quickly ushered Sean and Molly to their rooms. Harry suggested I leave as well, but I couldn't let him handle my ex-husband alone. I reassured Harry with a firm, "I'll be fine," and stayed.
You're unbelievably sneaky. Seducing a woman while her husband isn't around, you homewrecker.
I'm glad I sent the kids away. I wouldn't want them to hear such vile words.
Homewrecker? That's,
It's the truth.
isn't that a better description of someone named Alina?
Alina,
I didn't recognize the name, but Ryan clearly did. His bravado vanished as his face went pale. Just moments ago, he was so full of himself, but now his eyes darted nervously from side to side.
why do you know that name?
I wouldn't have brought it up if you hadn't forced my hand by showing up uninvited. I didn't want to hurt my wife, but for the sake of moving forward, it's time to settle this once and for all.
Ryan's face drained of color. From his reaction, I could piece things together. Alina, she's your affair partner, isn't she? It was a shot in the dark, but it hit its mark. Ryan flinched, his shoulders jerking violently. His mouth twitched and sweat beaded on his forehead. But you already admitted to having an affair before. Why does this upset you now?
Well, that's because.
As Ryan struggled to respond, Harry stepped in calmly.
Back then, he still had money and figured he could handle any compensation claims. Plus, he thought Julia would never actually go through with the divorce.
Exactly. Sure, I signed the divorce papers, but I never thought you'd actually file them.
What? I was dumbfounded. Where did this confidence come from? Did he genuinely believe I was hopelessly devoted to him?
And now that your affair went south, you cheated again, didn't you? And you ended up losing all your savings in compensation.
How do you know all this?
While you were busy harassing us, I did some digging. Frankly, don't you find it embarrassing to cling to your ex-wife like this? You thought Julia's kindness meant she'd take you back, didn't you?
Ryan said nothing, his silence confirming the truth. I had clearly been underestimated. During our marriage, especially toward the end, I had resigned myself to following Ryan's lead. That's probably why he thought he could say or do anything to me. I would still accept it.
Yes, exactly. I've been exposed at work, and now I'm about to be kicked out of my place. Julia, you're kind. You'll help me, right?
Why on earth would I help you?
What? No, but even if you remarried, you still.
Me? Still like you? Seriously? Who in the world could be that naive? It's absurd to think anyone would still pine for someone who suddenly cheated and abandoned their family. I've said this over and over, but you're a nuisance. I can't even stand to look at you. And the kids? Look at them. It's obvious they admire Harry far more than they ever did you, even though you spent over a decade with us.
But I supported you.
And I took care of you. I handled all the housework and childcare. Did you know? A marriage is about mutual support. Once you start acting like it's all one-sided, it's over. And let's not forget, you cheated. That makes you the worst. I thought he'd argue back, but Ryan just stood there trembling, his face pale.
So, you're saying you never.
You're nothing but a bothersome person to me. It seems his strange confidence stemmed from the belief that I still cared for him. He thought there was no way I'd reject him. He must have thought that even if I rejected him now, I would eventually come around. After repeatedly denying this head-on and confronting him with his vulnerability involving Alina, he finally backed down. I would have been content if he disappeared from my life for good. However, at Harry and the kid urging, I decided to file for compensation. With the evidence Harry had gathered and Ryan's own confession, the compensation claim was quickly accepted. I worried about whether he had any money left to pay, but it turned out his parents would cover it. Ryan had always told me his parents were toxic, which is why I'd never met them. But that was a lie. They were simply estranged. Through a lawyer, I contacted his parents for the first time and found them to be reasonable and polite. They even agreed to pay child support on Ryan's behalf. Ryan was taken back to live with his parents and now lives under their supervision. His once carefree lifestyle completely changed, and now he juggles work and house chores. He doesn't even have time to cheat, let alone relax, and has reportedly become much more subdued. His parents also expect him to repay them for the compensation in installments, which will likely take years. I don't feel sorry for him, but I can't help but think how pitiful his situation is. With Ryan's chapter finally closed, peace and happiness returned to my life with Harry and the kids. I already knew Harry was a kind and gentle man, but I hadn't realized just how dependable he could be. The kids felt the same, and Harry's reputation in the family soared even higher. Though Harry was a bit embarrassed by all the praise, I truly believe I married the right person this time. My first marriage may have been a failure, but as they say, all's well that ends well. And I'm so glad my last marriage is with Harry.